So as we talk about the chemistry of carbon, I want to make sure that you guys understand and have a frame of reference for what level of organization that we're talking about. And so carbon is a what? An element. An element. And so when you have something that's a substance that's composed of only one type of atom, that's an element. And so all of those elements that are on the periodic table are all groups of specific single atoms, only one type of atom. When you combine two or more atoms with a chemical bond, then what do you get? A compound. A compound. And so an element plus an element chemically bonded was going to give you a compound. Okay. And what makes up an element is an atom. So atoms make up elements. So all matter is composed, the smallest unit of matter is composed of atoms. If you have a bunch of the same type of atom together, that's going to be an element. And then when you put two or more elements together and chemically bond them to each other, that's a compound. Now, what are the two ways that we can chemically connect them to each other? Ionic bonds or covalent bonds. So they can either transfer electrons or they can share electrons. Now, to get more technical, if you transfer electrons, that's called an ionic compound. But if the electrons are shared through a covalent bond, that's what we call molecules. And so what we're going to be talking about is molecular interactions, okay? And we're going to be talking about very, very large molecules, macromolecules. That's what macro means. Macro means big. Molecules is combinations of elements, of atoms that are covalently bonded to each other. And in order to put them together, see, this is where I think that understanding prefixes and root words is really important, because it makes this complicated vocabulary a lot less scary. If you understand that macro, anytime you see macro, it means really large. Okay? And what's the opposite of macro? Micro. And scope means to view. So a microscope means to be able to view something that's very small. So we know that poly means many. Mer means parts. And tion, that suffix always means the process of. And so when we break this word down, it means the process of to polymerize, means to put together, to eyes. So the process of putting together many parts. So what is the relationship between a monomer and a macromolecule? Well, a monomer itself is a group of atoms connected together. You guys have all seen trains, right? A train with cars. Okay, each car on a train is like a monomer. And the way those cars are connected to each other, that's the covalent bond that connects the monomers to each other. And so you can have a very, very short train or a very, very, very long train. If you've ever driven up through the Cajon Pass, like to go to Vegas, sometimes you see trains that are hundreds of cars long. And they wind through the Cajon Pass very slowly because it's, and they have like 6 engines pulling or pushing because the train is so heavy. So here our example is like the Lego blocks. And the individual building blocks are called the monomers, and you put them together in this process called polymerization, the process of putting together the monomers to make a polymer. Now we have 4 large polymer molecules that we're going to be talking about here. Okay, we already mentioned carbohydrates. So that was the bun of our hamburger. So we got the top bun and the bottom bun. And then what about that meat patty? That's proteins. Good. So there's our meat. Oh, and I can get fancy. I can use I can make it colorful. There. There's my meat. Now let's make this a double-double. That's what I eat when I go to. And then, oh, we got to have some cheese on it. Right? So, here we'll put some cheese. Cheese has a lot of what in it? Dairy. Okay, it is a dairy. Yeah, fat. So, fats belong to which category of these big molecules? Lipids. Okay. And color in the bun. Gotta make it crafty. It's so cute. Just love it. I can do this with my iPad. It kind of satisfies my fix for coloring too. But what are we missing here? Well, okay, we gotta put some lettuce on it, right? There's some lettuce. Gotta put some onions. Ew. Somebody said ew to onions. There's some onions. And then we got ketchup and mustard and mayo. Now, mayo. What do you think spread is, you guys? You're so clueless. Spread on a burger is mayonnaise and ketchup and some relish mixed together. And that's what spread is, mayo. Don't be hating on the mayo. Mayonnaise is delicious. Dip your french fries in it, and then you'll really have a treat. Ew! It's so good. Oh. Forte, please, with the fake. That's going to be forever on YouTube now. That noise. Okay. But what have we left off of our list here? Nucleic acids. Nucleic acids. We can't forget them. Nucleic acids. We don't want to forget about our nucleic acids. But they're really not. I mean, they're in our burger. They are. Because nucleic acids are in the DNA that's in every single cell that we ingest when we eat our hamburger. Do you think about that? That when you're eating a hamburger, that you're eating cells? No. But you should. Because you are. Why? Because you are. You should know what you're eating.
I don't want to think about the fact I'm eating cells. So I'm trying to... Aren't cells alive?
Well, these cells are cooked now, so they're definitely not alive. So let's look at that. Let's look at that hamburger meat, right? What is meat? Well, what is meat? Okay, so we say meat is protein. Okay, so it came from cow. What part of the cow?
The belly part.
Did you realize that meat is muscle? Well, it's got some fat in it, depending upon what part of the meat, how lean the meat is. Okay, so ground beef is ground up muscle that they just grind it and they add a little bit of extra fat for flavor and they grind it up. So instead of it being in a steak or tri-tip, it's all ground up. So if you want to pay like the most for meat, you can get ground sirloin, which is sirloin steak that's run through a grinder and ground up. Okay? Or you can buy a sirloin steak and put that between a bun and have a steak burger. Okay, so meat is muscle. Well, what is muscle tissue? Well, muscle is a tissue. And if we look at the tissue, what is the tissue made of? Cells. So when you eat a steak, you're eating a hunk of a cow's muscle. When you eat bacon, you're eating some pig's muscle that comes from the belly of the pig. And the fat, well, those are fat cells. Big fat cells full of lipid. So cells, let's see. So I know that skeletal muscle cells, they have striations and many nuclei. So I'm going to eat a whole bunch of these skeletal muscle cells. Right? So there's a whole bunch of them. And if I look inside those skeletal muscle cells, they have a lot of a specific protein. See, now I'm using a microscope, right? I'm looking. There's all those muscle cells. And if I look really closely in those muscle cells, inside of those muscle cells, there are molecules called actin and myosin. And actin and myosin are proteins. And there are other proteins in there. Now we remember cells. Cells have a cell membrane and all those other little organelles and a nucleus. And they do all the things that cells do. All the cellular functions, protein synthesis, cellular respiration. Make all the things that the cell has to do. And the job of a muscle cell is to do what? What is its primary job? To contract. To contract, to shorten, to allow movement, to allow breathing. If you're a cow, you do a whole lot of standing around and chewing. Right? Have you ever watched cows? Yeah. They moo, and then they stand and they chew. Okay? And they digest, and they make cow patties. And if you've never lived in the country at all, you might not know what a cow patty or a cow pie is. A cow pie is not something that you eat. So when they go to the bathroom, it comes out, and a lot of times it'll like accumulate like in a little puddle, like a round, and then it dries. And it gets hardened, and it's you can pick it up and throw it like a frisbee. Some of you are thinking of inventing a new sport. No? Okay. So, actin and myosin. Actin and myosin are proteins, and isn't that one of the types of organic compounds, right? So what is a protein made out of? A protein is a large molecule. Actin and myosin are very, very large molecules, but what are they made out of? Amino acids. So if we go one level smaller, we get to amino acids. Now, okay, so we've gone from something you can see, a hunk of meat, knowing that that hunk of meat has protein. It also has fat in it, okay? It also has lipids. But, okay, we got protein. It came from a cow. It's actually muscle. That muscle is made up of cells. Within the cells, there's molecules, actin and myosin. And I know that those molecules are made of these building blocks called amino acids. What is an amino acid? What is an amino acid? What have I just drawn? I've drawn a generic amino acid. Did you draw this in your notes? Are you taking notes? If you stare at your crotch and it's glowing, I do not think it's because you're radioactive. I think it's because you're on your phone. And your phone is glowing, and you've got it on your lap, and you're more interested in your phone than my lecture, which is incredibly intellectually stimulating. That's when you guys are supposed to say, oh, it is, my God. It really is. Oh, my God. Very good. Very good. It's life-changing. Okay. So what does this N represent? Nitrogen. And the C is carbon. And the O, oxygen. And the H, hydrogen. And the R? There is no R element. Okay? The R is the R group. Very good. The R group. And it can change. That's all amino acids have this same backbone structure. And it's the R group that changes, and that's how we get our different amino acids. Now, why are we talking about amino acids? We were just talking about proteins. We were just talking about cow and muscle. Because I want you to see levels of organization. Because here we have our elements. And what do these lines represent? Them connecting the covalent bonds. And so an amino acid is actually a molecular compound. And we have now connected, when we put two amino acids next to each other, so I'll show them by dots. So each of these little dots represents an amino acid, and the line represents the connective bond. Now, we have a chain of amino acids together, which makes a protein. But I want you to see that in your body, the whole reason that we have a digestive system is that we cannot have chunks of hamburger meat flowing through our blood vessels. Why not? Because they would be too big to get into our cells. If you had an individual cell, which is microscopic, remember, and it gets bombarded with a chunk of hamburger meat, it's going to obliterate the cell. And I don't think that sounds like it would be a very good deal for our survival. So, instead of having chunks of hamburger meat, we have to take in chunks of hamburger, cow muscle, chew it up, break it down into individual cells, break those cells apart with digestive enzymes to get proteins, break those proteins down to get individual amino acids, and those individual amino acids then get absorbed into our bloodstream and carried where they need to go. And what does our body do with those individual amino acids? Does our body need to make cow muscle? No. We take in cow muscle, but we aren't going to turn it into cow muscle. What are we going to turn it into? Whatever we need. Exactly. And it might be energy, because we do get energy from eating proteins. But we get most of our energy from carbs, right? So it is, our digestive system is the ultimate Lego set. Because we can take in all of this different stuff, and then we break it apart and assemble and make whatever we need. Which brings me to talking about a little bit about nutrition. If you had a premium race car, would you go to Valero gas station and buy the cheapest gas? Valero always has like the cheapest gas around me. Or would you go to the premium gas stations and buy the highest octane gas for your race car? I don't know. I would buy Supreme, the highest octane, the best gas. I wouldn't cheap out on the gas that I was going to put into my race car. Am I really talking about a race car? No. It's my analogy for your body as an engine. And you're going to get the kind of performance out of your body based upon what fuel you give it. So if our body is this big metabolic Lego set, do you want to give it good building blocks? Do you want to give it only chips and Gatorade building blocks? Or do you want to give it all of the nutrients and vitamins and minerals that it needs to be able to grow really good, healthy tissue? Why do you think people nowadays grow taller than they used to? We eat better, better nutrition, better food. When I was in college, I had a friend who was from Pakistan. And here she was, my age, and she looked like a 12-year-old girl. She was tiny, 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 tiny petite. She had had really poor nutrition when she was a child before she came to the United States. During those really important developmental years. And her body never reached its physiological potential. Because she didn't give her body what it needed to grow properly. That's called malnutrition, right? So, are you guys done growing?
No.
No. Your bodies are still growing bone and muscle and skin. And so when you give your bodies not all of the building blocks that you need, you can't grow the kind of body that you are going to need. Because how long is your body supposed to last you? Until you die. And do you know when that's going to be?
Probably like 70 years.
70, hopefully 70, 80, 90s. Do you want to make it that long? I don't know. So, okay. So, I want you guys to understand the scope of what we're looking at here. That we're looking about these organic compounds, which are very, very large molecules, but ultimately, each one of these molecules is made up of simpler building blocks. And so as we go through each of these groups, you will see what each group is mainly used for. Carbohydrates are structure and energy. So examples of carbohydrates would be, and I'm going to go very quickly through this, glucose. But then we have structural carbohydrates like cellulose, which is in the cell walls of plants. And we cannot, our digestive system, we can't break down cellulose. So this is what becomes fiber or roughage in our diet. This is why when you eat a whole bunch of corn, it goes in and comes out looking about the same. Okay? Uh-huh. It does. It does. Okay? Carbohydrates are all based upon this simple building block molecule called a monosaccharide. And all monosaccharides have that formula, C6H12O6. And so here is a molecular diagram of a monosaccharide. It's a ring of carbons with carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, always in a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. So for every one carbon, there's twice as many hydrogens and 1 oxygen. So C6H12O6. Twice as many hydrogens there. Monosaccharides, 1 sugar. Di means 2 sugars. Poly means many sugars. So, different sizes. This is going to be glucose. Disaccharides, example is sucrose. So, if you take a glucose and you connect it to a fructose, you get sucrose. And polysaccharides are going to be really long molecules like starch and glycogen That's a C, sorry. Okay, and cellulose. Okay. Okay, so we have different sizes of carbohydrates. The simplest carbohydrate is going to be our monosaccharide. If we put two monosaccharides together, we get a disaccharide. And then if you chain together many, many monosaccharides, you're going to get a polysaccharide. So that's going to be the most complex. But our cells cannot take in polysaccharides or disaccharides. That's why we have to be able to break them down into the simple building blocks, monosaccharides. So don't forget, the role of our digestive system in all of this. And this is just a diagram showing that the starch molecule is made up of several building blocks connected together. And then each building block is really a very complicated molecule, lots of different elements connected together by covalent bonds. Lipids. This is our second category of organic compounds, lipids. Okay? These are also known as fats, oils, waxes, and steroids. And you might be like, oh my God, steroids. Oh no, steroids. We're talking about the naturally occurring steroids in our body, not anabolic steroids like weightlifters and athletes sometimes use, which make your testicles shrink. Why is that? Okay, so really quickly, anabolic steroids are growth hormones, okay? And when you inject them, you are giving yourself an artificial supplement of a hormone that naturally exists in your body, either HGH, human growth hormone, or testosterone, which masculinizes and makes you build muscle. So when you are taking and injecting these steroids into your body says, oh wow, I've got a whole lot of testosterone. I have more than enough testosterone. And so you're naturally producing testosterone in the testicles. So the testicles say, oh, you got plenty of testosterone. You don't need me. I'm going to get smaller because I'm not necessary. And so you have this shrinkage of the testicles because of the artificial supplementation of the testosterone. If you give a woman testosterone, she's going to become more masculine, take on more masculine features.
Oh my God, I can't believe you just did that.
And that would be Forte again. Thank you. Forever and ever modeling what a Russian weightlifter, a female Russian weightlifter sounds like. Well, women naturally have some testosterone, and guys, you have it naturally too. Well, yeah, when you work out, it does increase your testosterone level, but that's not the same as injecting testosterone into your body. Okay? All right. Fats, oils, and waxes. Fats, oils, and waxes. So steroids aren't necessarily a bad thing, and when we're talking about steroids, we're really talking about cholesterol, which gets a really bad rap because cholesterol is part of all cell membranes. You would die if you didn't have any cholesterol. Okay? It's when you get too much cholesterol and the LDLs, the high-density lipoproteins, and the LDL, low-density lipoproteins. That's when you get too much fat. Okay? Lipids are energy storage molecules, and they're important parts of biological membranes. So energy storage, this is where we're talking about fat. Why do we have fat on our body? To store energy so that when times are good and we're getting lots of food, we store it on our body so that when we don't have enough food, we can break down the fat that's in our fat cells and survive. Okay? This goes way, way back to when there wasn't a McDonald's on every corner. Okay? Now, I'm never going to face a famine. But my body doesn't know that. So every time I eat that double-double, which I shouldn't be eating a double-double, right? I shouldn't even probably be eating a hamburger. Not the best thing for you. My body's going to be like, oh, I don't need that energy right away because I'm not out foraging for food all day long every day. And it's going to turn it into fat. And I'm going to store it as fat on my body. Question?
You know how like some people like that they don't eat like every
Yes.
Really low. Like,
Yes.
What is, like, how does that work?
Okay, that's hypoglycemia when your blood sugar goes really, really low. So,
So it's like, I'm confused about it.
okay, so hypoglycemia occurs when your cells only run on glucose. Glucose, okay, you asked the question, it's a good one. Glucose is a sugar, and it flows around in your bloodstream, and your cells need glucose for energy to run. And so the only way they're going to get that glucose is to pull it out of your blood. Well, if your cells all of a sudden start screaming for glucose and there's no sugar in your bloodstream, you start to feel shaky and clammy and lightheaded and not so good. And that's because your body is saying, hey, you need to eat. Your blood sugar is too low. Now, if you're hypoglycemic, your blood sugar can drop dangerously low to the point where you pass out. So what you want to do as a person who gets hypoglycemic is never eat a whole bunch of carbs at once. You always want to eat carbs and have protein because you want to try to keep your blood sugar level at a healthy range and not let it go bouncing up and down and up and down. When you're hypoglycemic and then you go and you eat a candy bar because you're starving, then your blood sugar level goes really, really high, and it may take a while. And people who are hypoglycemic have a greater tendency to become type 2 diabetics as they get older because your body is already having a hard time balancing your sugar. Question?
Okay, so I have the same question as her, but I eat, I eat a lot.
You eat a lot.
Yeah, but like, I still, like, get shaky.
Okay, so you want to make sure that you're eating a lot, but you're also eating the right things.
I eat everything, so.
Okay, I would say that you know, you need to probably eat more often, eat lots of more small meals, because and stay away from the sugars. Eat fewer carbohydrates and start giving yourself more proteins. So you should have protein bars always in your backpack, and you know, every couple of hours you're going to have like a protein bar. For lunch, have string cheese, eat yogurt. Don't do chips and sodas and things like that, because that's going to make your blood sugar go up and then crash. And so you need to eat more often, because you probably have a really fast metabolic rate, so your cells are using up that sugar really quickly. So if you give your cells a whole bunch of sugar, they're going to suck it up out of your bloodstream, and then your blood sugar level is going to drop. Now, I have type 2 diabetes. I have the other problem where I eat something and my sugar level goes up, but then my cells need the sugar, but they aren't very good at absorbing the sugar anymore. And so the sugar stays in my bloodstream, and that's what type 2 diabetes is. I can't get the sugar into my cells because my cells start ignoring the sugar. And so what I have to do is I have to really be careful about what carbohydrates I eat. And through losing weight, it helps your cells to become more receptive to the sugar. And that's type 2 diabetes. You know, different than type 2 diabetes where people have to give them, type 1 diabetes where people have to give themselves shots of insulin. That's because their pancreas stops working. And insulin is a hormone, okay? A hormone, which is a protein that helps opens up your cells to taking in glucose. Question?
Am I more, most of the time when wrestling stuff, I don't really eat for like 2 or 3 days at a time. Sometimes am I more?
That is a horrible habit. My dad was a wrestler in high school. It is very, very, very unhealthy. And I understand the need in wrestling to be the heaviest guy in the lower weight class. Okay? So what you do is you get as close as you can, but then you got to make sure that you make weight.
Yeah.
And so at the last minute, you got to drop, 5 pounds. So 15?
Yeah, he's done that before.
It's so bad, so you spit in cups and use laxatives and all kinds of horrible things. And it is really, 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 really unhealthy. And if you were my son, I'd be like, no, son, bulk up and move up to the next weight class. It's very, 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 very unhealthy. You want to be lean muscle, but when you're trying to drop 15 pounds, you're dropping water. And water is required for every single metabolic reaction in your body. And it's not good for you. Yeah.
So with me being hypoglycemic as well, so with wrestling it's like really hard because like when we have to like weight cut, and,
Yeah.
like at the count like how much I eat is so hard to make me taste it. Like I always get like really bad during wrestling season, and especially during training before the weight cut.
So that's your look. Becoming hypoglycemic is your body telling you that you're out of homeostasis. You're out of balance. It's your body telling you you're not taking care of it. Your body's screaming at you, telling you, I'm out of balance. Not good. So stay away from the carbs and concentrate with the lean proteins so that you're going to be lean muscle mass. Okay? Because that's what you want. You want strength for wrestling. And you don't want fat. So you have to have lean muscle mass. And then it's also your conditioning and your training. Because you have to have endurance muscle, right? Because you're not going to be running really fast or do anything like that, but you need to be able to hold position for a long time, right? So you need slow twitch muscle. So you need, and I would also do a lot of yoga. Because you got to be really flexible, right?
Yep.
And you have to have long, lean, strong muscle. So, wrestling is an awesome sport that does not get enough attention. And one of the most challenging sports, and there's not a lot of glory with it, but if you've ever gotten down on the ground and tussled with somebody and trying to break a hold and stuff like that, my dad used to wrestle with me when I was a kid, and oh my God, you'd just be sweating but it's so much fun. It's a great sport. Greco-Roman wrestling is really awesome too.
Bodies flying everywhere.
Yeah, we're not talking about professional wrestling, which there's a lot of athleticism in professional wrestling though too. Okay, biological membranes here. We got off on a tangent, but it was very good. Biological membranes. We're talking about cell membranes here. And if you remember, we had a phospholipid, see, there it is, bilayer. Okay, so phospholipid bilayer, 2 layers of these lipid molecules with phosphates in them. And then waterproof coverings, what are they talking about there?
Skin.
Okay, our skin does have lipids in it, but also we're talking about wax on like birds' feathers, or there are a lot of amphibians, frogs, that make a lipid that they then wipe over their bodies, which help them to not dehydrate. So, fats, oils, and waxes can come in lots of different shapes and structures, and the difference between these, what we call saturated and unsaturated, has to do with how many hydrogens we have on the fatty acid tail. So, lipids are going to be, a general characteristic is they're made up of a glycerol molecule. So this here is our glycerol. And this long chain of carbons and hydrogens is called a fatty acid. And so in our typical lipid molecule, we'll have 1 glycerol plus 3 fatty acid chains. And the fatty acid chains can be straight or bent. Okay, this fatty acid here is straight. And this one here you can see is bent, right? Now, why are they straight versus bent? It has to do with on the chain of carbons, which is represented here by the black in the center, okay? That represents the chain of carbons. And the hydrogens are represented as the little gray dots. If the chain of carbons is completely full of hydrogens, we say that it is saturated. Think of a sponge. It's got as much water in it as it can hold. It's full of water. We would say that sponge was saturated, right? Okay. If somebody soaks you with a hose, you'd say, "Oh my God, I'm saturated." You're full of water. You're just, ugh. You can't. You just. It's just dripping off. You can't hold anymore. Okay. A saturated fat. Those are the ones that are not as good for you. Okay, like butter. What's it saturated? It's saturated with hydrogens. It's full of hydrogens. Whereas oils like canola oil and olive oil are bent chains because they are unsaturated. So they're a little bit better for you. Everything in moderation, though. Okay. Unsaturated. And they're bent because they are not full of hydrogens and they have a double bond. And that's why they bend. Okay. And you've done your reading guide, so you've read about this and written notes on this on your worksheet. So I'm not talking some foreign language to you. You have some prior knowledge of this. Nucleic acids. Our next category, this is going to be our DNA and our RNA. This is going to be our blueprint of life, and we'll actually spend the least amount of time talking about this because DNA, you spend a lot more time talking about DNA and why DNA is so important in second semester when you talk about protein synthesis. Here we just introduced DNA that it's the blueprint of life. It carries information. It carries a code. And where do you find it? The nucleus. It's made up, its building block is called a nucleotide. And it can be in a single-stranded structure or a double-stranded structure. Proteins, last but not least. Large molecules that contain nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, made up of building blocks called amino acids. And don't forget, this PowerPoint is also available in our Google Classroom, just without all my writing on it. If you want to see my writing, you got to watch the YouTube video. And there I showed you this already. These are our amino acids. But notice they all have the same basic backbone structure. They just are different according to the structures down on the bottom. The R groups. And enzymes are so important. In fact, they have a whole section in the book just dedicated to them. Okay? So I'm going to stop here. If you watch this video, can you like it? Give me comments. Let me know what you think about the videos if you go back and watch it again.
Sure.
Okay? And make sure you tell all your friends to subscribe.